duties as the Chief Financial Officer, in conjunction with Dawn, the Business Administrator, is to identify possible revenue and appropriation trends, either upward or downward. A few years ago, we were noticing a downward trend in EMS revenue. I'm going to give you a 5-year history of where the revenue has gone. In 2011, realized revenue was $471,395.45. In 2012, realized revenue was $424,764.94. That was a decrease of $46,630.51. 2013, realized revenue was $383,315.48. That was a decrease in $41,449.46. 2014, realized revenue was $327,207.15, which was a decrease of $56,108.33. And 2015, unaudited, is $308,670.45, which is a decrease of $18,536.70.
Before you go on, Dawn, what year did we increase our rates?
We increased January 2015. We went from $675 a transport to $825.
And the big Medicare changes for the transports took effect between where you see the 425 go down to 383. That's where we were making a lot of money. But with the new regulations, you need 2 doctors to sign off on it, and the rate also dropped.
So excuse me, we're going to have an open public portion in a second. So Joe, with the increase in charges that we had, we still had a decrease in revenue?
Yes.
Excuse me, Joe.
Excuse me. Wait a minute. We will have an orderly meeting. Everyone will have their chance, but in
Well,
order
he
to
said
have...
real life. I just want to know what you said, real life revenue, and I don't know what
No,
that is.
realized means actually collected.
We will have a question
I'm
and
way
answer
back here, I
period.
didn't hear it all.
We'll have a question and answer period in a moment.
I also want you to remember too, when revenue decreases, it affects the current year budget and also the subsequent year's budget. The subsequent year's budget, you can only realize in the budget, or anticipate in the budget, what was realized the year before. So if it decreases in one year, it also affects the subsequent year's budget. But I also want to stress too, that typically municipalities do not generate revenue in excessive expenditures when it relates to public safety. You have to look at providing the best possible service in the most economic fashion. That's on the revenue side. On the appropriation side, it has been relatively level for the past few years, although the future could bring significant increases due to the Affordable Care Act, which will mainly increase benefits and full-time personnel. So really in closing, I just want to mention that our job here is to bring to the governing body's attention any trends, either positive or negative, and then give the governing body information so they can make an informed decision.
And from the sheets that you've gotten, you'll see some options. One is Robert Wood Johnson amount. You'll see option 1 is in-house with family coverage. So that would be figured on the highest side if everybody had family coverage, which might not, or probably will not be the case in the beginning at least. Option 2, it would be if everyone was just offered single coverage. So that would be the lowest possible way to provide the services, because then you're only insuring the individual and not dependents. So
And these
just
are net costs, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
net costs. Okay, so we provide that sheet for you. We're going to have another presentation by Robert Wood Johnson, and then we're going to open it up for the public questions. We have Matt, let me just introduce you here. We have Matt Strager. He is the Executive Director of Robert Wood Johnson Mobile Health Services. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening, Council.
We have Don Roberts. He is the Administrating Director. And we have Susan Crum, VP of Ambulatory Services. So we're going to have a presentation. Matt, if you could introduce and give some background on each of you, and we have a microphone.
That's what I was going to ask for. Thank you. Just make sure we get to the back of the room with that. Can you hear me in the back? All right. I want to first take a moment and thank the mayor. I want to thank the council president, the members of the council, and the business administrator for inviting us here to speak to you today. And I want to thank everybody for coming out from the community, because this is an important issue, and I can see how passionate everybody is about this, to be heard and to have the answers to your questions, and I think we're right to have that. It's important to me, from Robert Wood Johnson, it's important to our organization that we're here to answer your questions, to be as transparent as we can, so that you have the answers to understand what we're here to help with, and what our mission is, what our goals are, what our capabilities are. To be frank, read Facebook just like everybody else, and I see a lot of the comments that are made, and I see some of the information that's not factually accurate. And I want to make sure that from our perspective, from the council's perspective, from the organization's perspective, that we're giving everyone the facts as they stand. It's also very important for me, just as a moment, as an introductory statement, to say something very important. I am an EMS professional with 30 years of professional EMS background. I've been in this job, in this field, since 1986. I've worked in many, many different places in different states, and I have a lot of friends in the community. We at Robert Wood Johnson EMS work with Spotswood EMS on a daily basis. We provide advanced life support coverage, paramedic level coverage to the borough of Spotswood, and we've done that since the early 1980s. I wanted to be clear that we have an extremely good working relationship with Spotswood EMS. Director Barbarese and I have a very good open dialogue. We communicate regularly about things. We have an open dialogue whether there are any issues at all that arise. And the members of the existing EMS agency here in Spotswood do a good job. I don't want there to be any consideration at all that there's any disparagement against Spotswood EMS from us. It is very important to know that we're partners in EMS, we're partners in representing the community and doing what we can to provide the highest level of medical care possible. The question I get asked is, why Robert Wood Johnson EMS? Why are you good? There are a lot of reasons of things that Robert Wood Johnson does that are exceptional EMS for the community. We are backed by an academic medical center, which I guess sounds like a platitude. It sounds like a thing that's just up there. There's a big hospital up the road. We've got a medical school attached to it. What does that do for you? What it does is it supports an EMS agency. And EMS ambulances live at times as a public safety agency like fire and police, and at times like a public health entity like a hospital. When we're supported very strongly, in the strongest possible terms, by one of the leading academic medical centers in the country. They provide us with economic support. They provide us with logistical support. They provide us with academic support on our medicine. A few quick examples of that. We pioneered several years ago a change in CPR techniques, that we took some best practices that were taking place in places like Washington State up in Seattle. And everybody knows that Seattle was one of the first places that ever started doing EMS and started doing CPR and had very, very good save rates. Howard County, Maryland also, the medical director there started a big program there, and it's called High Performance CPR, or PIC Crew CPR. We at Robert Wood Johnson took the lead in bringing that to New Jersey, and have in fact rolled that out as one of the lead agencies in the state to the entire state. And we do this as a public service. We're not making any money on this. We're not doing anything to do anything but make sick people better, because that's what our mission is. By changing the technique that people do CPR with and changing how they do compressions, we took a cardiac arrest save rate of 7.5% roughly and raised it to 19%. And those are people that walk out of the hospital neurologically intact, doing nothing but changing the technique of CPR that we did, that we initiated. And then we offered that to the community. We offered that to the EMS agencies in the community. We offered that to the police departments in the community and fire departments and other EMS agencies across the counties that we cover, because we believe in it. We also took the lead in spinal motion restriction. I'm sure that many people here, I know all the EMTs are familiar with this. I'm not sure if the people from the general public are familiar with the concept of being boarded and collared, having a collar put on your neck if you're in a car accident, and they put you on a long backboard and they take you to the hospital for x-rays. And after 40 years of doing this, we found they were actually hurting people by doing that, which is kind of odd if you think about it, and it's counterintuitive. But we discovered that that change makes people better. So we took the lead in rolling out what we call SMR, spinal motion restriction, that protocol to the community, to all of our paramedics and our EMTs, but we offered that again to the entire EMS community over the communities that we cover, because it makes people better. Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. Don, I know you had a couple comments you wanted to make as well.
Well, I think I'll just pass it off, and I will open it up if the council's ready, and we will address any questions that
Council
you may
President, do you
have.
have questions for us specifically before?
Well, Matt, one thing I wanted to ask, I think, which is on the residents' minds, what's the difference when a rig pulls up to a home, whether it's Robert Wood Johnson or whether it's a home run, a home provided institution?
So, on the face of it, there's no appreciable difference. Spotswood EMS. I'm sorry?
Response time.
Please, you will have your chance. Please be respectful.
An ambulance, all right, I'll speak to response time. our ambulances will be placed in the stead of a Spotswood ambulance. There'll be an ambulance that sits in Spotswood and responds in what I would imagine is almost identically the same response time as a Spotswood ambulance would. But because I realize that response time is a critically important piece to the community, I want to speak to that. When the Spotswood ambulance is right now unavailable, they're on a call, they're committed elsewhere. They're on another emergency, or maybe they're committed to a fire scene or some other large event where they're not going to be here for a while. The community relies on mutual aid. This community provides mutual aid to other towns, and when needed, they accept mutual aid on behalf of them. That's where you get your second ambulance from. Your second ambulance comes from another community, which dramatically increases the response time for every other call. What we do at Robert Wood Johnson, because we have a large fleet of ambulances in the community, we move ambulances strategically using computers to tell us where the calls are likely to come in. We move those ambulances around. So if the Spotswood ambulance isn't available, as soon as that ambulance goes out, we move an ambulance in this direction to decrease the response time to the next call and the next call and the next call. And we do that throughout our service area. By having a large number of ambulances out, we will send our ambulances into Spotswood preemptively to be ready for the next call that happens. So I know that the next question becomes, will you send a Robert Wood ambulance from farther away at the expense of another mutual aid ambulance that might be closer? And the answer is no. In the interest of patient care, if there is a closer ambulance than ours, by all means, the closer ambulance will always take the call. But we have an opportunity to provide that second ambulance closer than you would normally get right now. On to the rest of the capabilities of an ambulance, a licensed ambulance in New Jersey is a licensed ambulance. So the EMTs have the same basic level of training, they have the same basic equipment, they have the same basic vehicle that all meets the standards for the state of New Jersey. Our paramedics and EMTs have quarterly competencies that we do on cutting edge medicine. We require all of our EMTs and paramedics to train shoulder to shoulder every quarter on what we determine are important cutting edge or maybe we've identified areas that we need to bolster our capabilities in. Our EMTs and paramedics come in every quarter and train up. So we do additional training, we bolster our response capabilities in that area. We provide equipment that I don't think is always available on every other ambulance, and I don't want to speak for Spotswood because I'm not sure, but we provide things, what's called, say, a true CPR device, which is a feedback device that when you push on the chest when you're performing compressions, it's actually a little needle that tells you, are you going deep enough? So it provides immediate feedback to tell you you're doing good CPR. Our ambulances are GPS located. So our dispatch center, what we call Med Central, which is located in New Brunswick, can see every single ambulance, every single paramedic unit in our world that we control, in where they are in real time, which helps us move the ambulances around to maximize response time. Council President, I think that's probably a good start for the differences and what we provide.
Matt, could you speak to the two hospitals in New Brunswick? That just because you're terming it a Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital ambulance doesn't mean that choice of hospital remains with Robert Wood Johnson.
Absolutely, very good point, Councilwoman. Our ambulances are branded Robert Wood Johnson. We provide the service, but our ambulances take patients wherever they want to go. So the first question that we ask a patient when we get in the back of the ambulance, other than what's wrong today, what do you need the ambulance for, is what hospital do you want to go to? We are required by regulations to follow certain destination requirements. If you have trauma, you have a car accident, you're shot, you're stabbed, or you fall off your roof, you're injured significantly, we have a trauma system that takes patients to trauma centers. Robert Wood Johnson is the regional trauma center for that. So we would transport patients from Spotswood by ground to Robert Wood Johnson for trauma, which is no different from what Spotswood EMS does today, because they're a licensed ambulance, they follow the same set of rules that we do for destination for trauma. Other than trauma, we transport patients that are in cardiac arrest, we're doing CPR on them, to the closest hospital. We always do that. That's standard medical practice. Anybody who's that critically ill, regardless, goes to the closest facility. Beyond that, we take patients where they want to go. So if the patients come to us and say they want to go to St. Peter's, or to Robert Wood Johnson, or to Old Bridge Regional, or to Perth Amboy, we take them there. And what's nice is if we know we're going a little farther away, we'll actually push an ambulance into Spotswood to cover you while that ambulance is taking a trip that might take them out of position. A good example of that is fairly recently, maybe not that recently, within the last year, one of our ambulances was responding to a call in East Brunswick. and the patient wanted to go to Patterson, which is, needless to say, pretty far out of our normal coverage area to be transporting patients to. But it was the right thing to do for the patient. So we put another ambulance down to that area to cover the area, and we took the patient to St. Joe's in Patterson, which is probably a 2-hour round trip. But it's what the patient asked for. There was no medical reason. They needed to go to a closer hospital, so we met their needs.
Any other questions from the dais?
Matt,
Sir?
where will you station your ambulance and your duty crew for us?
Wherever you ask us to, sir.
My question is,
It'll be in the borough of Spotswood. I can't speak to right now where the ambulance will
Not the
actually
particular
live.
location, but there will be an ambulance and a crew 24/7, 365 here in
Yes.
town.
Yes.
There will be an ambulance, and the crew, an important point, the ambulance and the crew will live in Spotswood. The ambulance and the crew will start their shift in Spotswood and end their shift in Spotswood. They're not gonna start in New Brunswick and then drive down Route 18 in rush hour and come here. We do this in a number of communities that we serve right now, where the ambulance will, our personnel, our EMTs, will drive their cars to a station and start their shift at a station someplace else in the community. So in Spotswood, our EMTs would drive and start here. Another point on personnel, and I do want to hit this, is it's very important to us that we get to know the community. And we know Spotswood right now. We respond on the paramedic level to Spotswood and have for 37, 35 years. So Spotswood is not a foreign community to Robert Wood Johnson EMS, nor to our dispatchers who dispatch calls in Spotswood every day. Our EMTs, as much as we can, are going to be dedicated to this base. So it's typically about 8 EMTs necessary to staff a unit 24/7. And granted that those EMTs will take off, they'll be sick one day, and they'll have a vacation day, or they'll be swapped out for some other operational need. But for the most part, we keep people in the community, so they get to know the people in the community. They're the same 8 people, for the most part, getting to know the community and the people and their needs, and the police officers who we respond to on a regular basis to calls, and the fire department who we respond to on a regular basis with calls. And to know the streets. And granted, every one of our ambulances has 2 different GPS systems to do turn-by-turn directions to get us to every call that we go to. So there's really no concern for us about getting lost on the way to calls, even if we put someone here who isn't that familiar with Spotswood. But we try very hard to keep our people here as much as possible so they get to know the community, they know the needs, they know the people. It just works better for us that way.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Mayor, any questions before we open it up?
No, sir.
No?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Our RFP for the primary ambulance has a requirement that the primary ambulance respond within 5 minutes, 59 seconds, 90% of the time. Do you foresee any problem in meeting that requirement?
And none whatsoever. Our primary ambulance is going to be stationed in Spotswood. It will stand in the shoes of the ambulance service that you have right now and meet the exact same response times that your existing ambulance would right now. I don't foresee any problem at all in meeting the response time requirements. And again, as I stated, I think because of our ability to provide timely backfill to second calls, we will be able to provide a higher level of service in that area than you do get right now. Another level of service that we provide, and I know this is important, is we have an extremely robust command structure and additional capabilities. We provide medical special operations response. We had a medical infection control ambulance response team last year. I'm sure everybody heard about the emerging infectious diseases that were going on, so we developed a special team to respond to that. When you have a fire or a major emergency, we have supervisors on the road to come out and take command, provide incident command at those types of events, to provide rehab for firefighters. We are a lead agency in what's called the New Jersey EMS Task Force, which is a consortium of many, many EMS agencies around the state of New Jersey that was created after 9/11 to provide disaster response. So we provide the host agency for what's called an ASAP, which is kind of a 4-wheel drive off-road ambulance, and more importantly, for what's called the Mass Casualty Response Unit number 5, or MCRU number 5, which looks like a big fire truck that's painted white, but it instead carries 100 patients worth of backboards, collars, oxygen, drugs, and the things you need for a major emergency. So if we have to respond to a huge fire and be there for days, we have the capability of providing command and support services for any type of major event that happens like that.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt, one of the things you mentioned, having the second ambulance respond, is the same as the first ambulance, would be what we call soft billing. Soft billing is that the borough assumes, or I'm sorry, Robert, we pay a subscription fee where
Right.
Robert Wood Johnson then makes up the amount that insurance doesn't cover. So we do not hard bill residents for either the first call or a responding ambulance.
Yes, for any call that we respond to at Robert Wood Johnson, we would bill precisely the same way I believe your EMS service bills today, which is to say, we bill people's insurance. We bill Medicare or Medicaid or Verizon or whoever your insurance is through, and we accept whatever insurance pays us for that ambulance service. If you're a resident or an employee of the borough, as you specified in your RFP, the borough is paying the difference through the money that you would be paying for this contract. So there would be no additional billing for municipal residents and municipal employees. So there's no change in that process from what exists today, as I understand it.
And I have to say, with the senior communities, we have Woodmere, Crescent Park, Clearwater. Some of these are income restricted as well, and I've had a great deal of concern of residents to me about the hard billing aspect. And right now, when we have our first ambulance out, a second call when Monroe comes in, as they did 80 times last year, they are hard billed. So,
Thank you.
very much.
One other point, and it's important for us, when we bill for service for patients who have a demonstrable financial hardship, we have a hardship waiver process. So if someone comes to us at Robert Wood Johnson and says, I'm on a fixed income and I can't afford this for whatever reason, we have a process in place to make sure that your elderly resident on a fixed income, for example, doesn't get put in collections and lose their house over an ambulance bill. It's just not what we do. We have a process that's very, very robust. We do that on a regular basis. Unfortunately, we're forced to because of people on fixed income and the cost of health care. We do that very regularly.
And I think you also spoke a lot about the resources that Robert Wood Johnson would bring to our town for training of AED training for firefighters and for senior centers. You would have these resources that would be available to us as well.
Absolutely, and it's important. Robert Wood Johnson, as I said earlier in my presentation, has the PIC Crew CPR program, and we offer that honestly to any community that wants it. So if there's any EMS or fire or public safety agency, police agency that wants the PIC Crew training, we train that. In addition, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital has a community teaching mission to come to the community and to teach CPR and AED classes, but also to do community health and wellness. And to be honest, that mission existed last week and it will exist tomorrow, regardless of the outcome of what happens here in Spotswood. That is the hospital's community health mission, and it's unchanged by what we do today.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Don. If you stay there, we're just going to open. Yes,
One thing.
yeah.
Matt,
Certainly,
would
sir.
you just clarify soft versus hard billing when it comes to ALS? Because this way there's no misunderstanding.
Very
other
good
than
point.
ALS has always been hard billing.
Yeah, so the councilman brings up a good point. We at Robert Wood Johnson provide two emergency 911 levels of service. One is called basic life support, which is what's provided at the municipal level, which is what we're talking about tonight. One is advanced life support, which is paramedic level. And we've provided the paramedic level to Spotswood for 35 years. That level comes usually in what looks like a sport utility vehicle. It's, say, a Chevy Suburban. It doesn't have a stretcher in the back, but the paramedics in that have a higher level of training. And they do have additional capabilities that, frankly, our ambulances nor Spotswood ambulances have. But we work as a partnership to do that. Those paramedics, and the system is set up this way by law, have heart monitors, drugs, tubes. We can provide effectively all the advanced care that you get in the emergency room in your living room, no matter where they are. We've been providing that. Paramedic service is unchanged by this, regardless of what happens. We will continue to provide paramedic level service to Spotswood regardless. That's our mission. And our billing for that is not affected by whatever happens here tonight or with this ordinance. Our billing for that purpose is the billing, say this right, the subscription service through this ordinance potentially will not affect the paramedic level billing. So there's no offset for a balance bill for the paramedic level, only for the basic level. That being said, the hardship waiver process always remains in place. So if there's anybody who calls us for paramedic level service or for basic level service and can't pay for it, they can't afford it, we always have the hardship process for that regardless.
Thank you, sir. Everyone set?
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you, Matt.
We're going to just to hang on here now.
Do you have any comments, anything you want to wrap with here for us?
Not at this point. I think there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of questions, and we'd like to be able to help you with the answers.
Thank you, Don. So we're about to open it to the public for your questions and comments. And we honestly believe that when you receive answers to your questions, that reasonable people will understand the decision this council's making.
Oh,
I can't say that people involved in emergency services, we can't sway you one way or another if you have a vested interest in this, but we believe the residents will see what the light is here. We respect your opinion, and we expect you to respect ours. And this meeting is going to be a civil discussion, and it must remain orderly for statements to be reflected in the minutes of our meeting. When you come to the podium, we're going to ask you to state your name and address for the record, and I want you to address all questions to myself, and I will farm them out to who I think can answer them the best way. Due to the number of people here today, to be fair to everyone, we are going to limit podium time to 5 minutes. And with that, I'll take a motion to open to the
Motion to
public.
open to the public.
Second.